Hey there, Fantha Trackers. This is Adam, your Australian correspondent, live from Quillen's Cantina on the Gold Coast of Australia, here to introduce my segment coming up here on the Fantha Tracks video show. That's right, we're going to be talking to Keith Kappel from Fantasy Flight Games. Talk a little bit about his love of Star Wars. We're going to talk about his first role-playing game that he played and its influence on him becoming a writer for Fantasy Flight Games, writing some of the great work you're going to be seeing and playing if you're an RPG player with this great series. We'll be talking about the narrative dice system. We're going to be talking about Edge of the Empire, Age of Rebellion, and of course, Force and Destiny. We'll talk a little bit about some of the miniature games, but main thing is we're going to talk a bit of Star Wars, all here at Fantha Tracks. We'll start rolling some tape. Here we go. Welcome to FanthaTracks.com. How you going? This is Adam, Australian correspondent here to chat to somebody I think you're going to find extremely entertaining and exciting today, as we're going to be talking about the Star Wars role-playing game from Fantasy Flight Games, and one of the contributors who's a writer, who's somebody that's played Star Wars himself for many years as well, the one, the only Keith Kappel. Mate, how are you?
Oh, I'm wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
It's an absolute honour to have you on here. Now, before I go into it too deep, folks, myself, I've been playing Star Wars, whether it's from the West End games, Wizards of the Coast, and I have to say, the work done on the Fantasy Flight Games game itself, the system, everything, is so revolutionary, and to see a bunch of old gamers like myself and my team absolutely go to mush like kids, mate. Honestly, we were just so, it was like a new toy. It came out and like, oh, wow. And everyone was diving through the books, wanting to know more and more, mate. So, mate, well done.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wish I could take credit for all of it, but, like, really all credit to Jay Little for designing an amazing game. He also designed the excellent X-Wing miniatures game. Sam Stewart for heading up the RPG department over there, and all the other great devs, especially some of the people early on, like Katrina Ostrander and Andrew Fisher and Max Brook, who really helped shape what that line was going to be, and Zoe Robinson, the art director at the time, who really shaped the look of that product line, and it's gorgeous. And one thing you always hear about people who get a new book, when I'm desperate for feedback on what I've written, is they love to tell me how gorgeous the art is. And I'm like, well, that's great, but why don't you talk more about me? And they're like, no, but this one art piece, and which is great, though. The art's gorgeous. It's a privilege to have my words anywhere near the beautiful art that's in these books. It's worth buying for the art alone, I would say.
But I think the wealth of information is some of the best of any source book or RPG I've ever, encountered. I mean, this is one of the great things about RPGs in general, is the amount of wealth of information people can get, regardless of just playing the game.
Sure. I think that gets overlooked a little bit, is that for people who were fans of the old essential guides that Del Rey used to put out for Star Wars, where they would be like Essential Guide to Species, and there's all these different information about the aliens. The RPGs do a lot of work similar to that. And so even if you don't play the game, which you should play the game, but even if you don't, these books still have just a lot of value in that they contain a lot of lore information about the Star Wars world. I know the most recent book, I'm sure we'll get into it later, Dawn of Rebellion, I got to work on 4 new alien species from Rogue One. Well, 3 new ones and 1 old one in a way. But I got to develop a lot about like their home worlds and their, social customs and the culture, and that's not information you're going to find anywhere else in the short term. Anyway, the dream is always that something I wrote works into other products and stuff, but I don't know if or when that happens. But yeah, there's a lot of information about worlds, about species, about equipment and vehicles and stuff that's unique to building the world of the RPGs. West End Games was famous for having developed a lot of that like early expanded universe information, because for a period of time in the late 80s and early 90s, it was kind of the only show in town for new Star Wars information and lore about the world. And they also, of course, got carte blanche to do whatever they wanted in a way.
Without a doubt. So let's take a trip down memory lane and look at
When did you first get into Star Wars? When did you really get that itch that it was the fandom for you?
So, I mean, I was born in '79, so I was not old enough to go to A New Hope in theaters or to remember Empire Strikes Back in theaters. And really, my earliest Star Wars memories, I certainly had the toys, lots of Ewok toys. But I remember just as a kid, it was something always on. We had the VHSs, I think, at home. So it was just on a lot. And like most smaller children, I think I was into it. I had a phase, and then it went away. And where I really got deep into the fandom was leading up to those special edition releases. So those came out in like '97. And I want to say I started getting into it right around the time of Kevin J. Anderson's new Jedi trilogy thing in like the 92, 93, 94, somewhere in there. It was like early high school for me. And then once I discovered that, I went back and read like the Zahn trilogy and the Brian Daley Han Solo trilogy. And then I was kind of just, I was in. So I was reading everything. I was getting all of the role-playing game content because, again, that was kind of like, there was a lot of it out there and there wasn't a lot of anything else. So yeah, it kind of spun through that, and it culminated with the special editions and like the episode 1 release, and then it was like, well, I guess I'm the Star Wars fan guy now. That's who I am, because I love it, man. It's the modern day myth. It's our Hercules, our Iliad and the Odyssey, and it has a lot to say about our culture and it's weird because it's not just our culture as it's not a uniquely American myth, right? It's very accessible to people around the world, like yourself in Australia, and people in other countries love it as well. So
yeah, I think that's the genius of George Lucas. He was able to tap into what makes myth great, not on just one level, but on so many levels. From everything. I mean, that's why legends like that, whether it's going back to the Hercules or the mythology of Arthurian legend and stuff like that. It doesn't matter which one, but it's all something that we can tap onto. But speaking of that, what is your favourite character in Star Wars, and why are they so good?
Ooh, you're getting hard now. This choosing between children, but I'm a Han Solo first guy of the main characters. I was never a big Jedi person. Certainly, all of my early role-playing game type characters were more like smuggler, bounty hunter, scumbag types, because that's sort of just what I enjoyed exploring. But some of my favorite characters are guys that get very little screen time. I'm a big Dengar fan, and I'm a really big Garvin Drace Red Leader fan. He looked like a drunk Texan showing up to the biggest fight of his life in A New Hope. And not that I'm drunk or a Texan, but for whatever reason, I strongly identified with that. So those guys always have a special place for me.
I think there's something that's so good about Star Wars is that it's not just the lead characters or the lead protagonists that we always aspire to or to like, or vice versa. I mean, I look at half the people in Jabba's palace. There's some interesting people in and around there that whether it's back in the days of the Kenner toys, when I was picking these up and going, what's this guy's story? This is intriguing. Right. Or how did Lando get the outfit, and how did he get in there, and how long has he been in the palace? All those tiny little stories, and that's why I think that it's such a wealth of great storytelling that way.
I mean, the production design on a Star Wars movie are second to none, and the attention to detail in the background, second to none. And there's just great design, evocative creature design for things that have almost no screen time, or that aren't even in focus on the shot they're in. The only way you really see what they look like is through a toy or production stills or something like that. And it all looks great. I mean, you could even... Episode 2, the Outlander Club, has amazing creatures and costumes and stuff happening in the background, and that's you don't even see it. It was just there while they were filming, and none of it even ever got on camera. No, you can't. I mean, one of the most popular characters in Star Wars is Boba Fett. He has almost no screen time. He just has really good design. So yeah, it's clearly a strength of Star Wars is just the character design and the production design. It's the best team. I don't know why they don't win an Oscar for it every single time.
Oh yeah,
they have a movie.
agreed.
Because it's for production design, set design, costuming. Like they're the best. They're the best.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like it. I mean, I've from time to time look at other franchises, and you know, the test of a world is if you can, you know, maybe have if the camera's focusing on obviously the characters that you were meant to be following. If you could just turn the the camera this way, and see a whole other story going on with others, that's a real world. I mean, Ridley Scott's probably the only other person that could do it apart from George at the time.
I mean, well, at the time, I would say Lord of the Rings has done a really good job with that as well. The original Lord of the Rings trilogy had a similar sort of attention to detail and interesting-looking things happening everywhere you looked. But yeah, it's rare because it's expensive at the end of the day. It's expensive and it's time-consuming, and you know, movie making is a business first and foremost. Yeah, so it's rare that people put a focus on that. But it's welcome, and obviously people gravitate toward it, right? And certainly Star Wars has made its money back spent there on merchandising 1,000 times over. So, yeah, it's worthwhile for all the directors listening that are listening to me. None. But, yeah, no, I love it. I love the density of the world, right? And it feels like, yeah, there are things happening everywhere you might look, and it adds rewatchability too, because there's always a little bit you didn't notice. So no, I love it.
Without a doubt. Now, obviously, you know, you got into the Star Wars franchise, you got into the characters. What led you also to get into role-playing games? What was the first role-playing game you played?
So the very first tabletop RPG I ever played was Robotech from Palladium, which was amazing because I was blessed with very nerdy friends growing up in junior high and high school, really all through elementary through high school. But one of them had a nerdy older neighbor that had his anime phase long before we did. And at that time, in the very early 90s, late 80s, it was like Akira and like 3 other things, and that was kind of all we were getting out here, unless you worked really hard to get stuff. And Robotech was one of the few things you could get your hands on. So we became diehard Robotech fans. The excellent Jack McKinney novels, which was 2 amazing Star Wars writers, Brian Daley and James Luceno, who actually wrote all those Robotech books. So, like, everything I'm into, there's like a weird Star Wars connection somehow that maybe I don't know about at the moment, but like if you look at it at all, like, oh look, there's the Star Wars connection. But yeah, those 2 guys were just amazing. They wrote great books, which I really enjoyed. Obviously enjoyed the cartoon. And then when we found out there was a way to get more out of this hobby and this game, none of us had ever played anything like it before. I'm still not sure I could explain the rules of how a Palladium RPG works, at least that version of it, because it was kind of a weird Dungeons & Dragons old version. It's like what Paizo does now, but like they started with like a weird rule set. I don't know. But we loved it all the same. We made it work. Really, all any RPG is, it's a framework to have a collaborative, improvisational storytelling game. As a guy who works in this field now, I always feel like the more you could sort of make the mechanics and the rules secondary to that core collaborative improvisational storytelling experience, like the better a game you're going to have. But back then, you know, that's how the games were, and we moved quickly on to Rifts, which is another big Palladium property that's enjoying a resurgence now. And you know, I played those games with those guys, just the 3 of us. So it was always like a rotating GM and 2 players through like junior high and a chunk of high school. And then we discovered the Star Wars game and also the internet. So I had all of a sudden this ability to get all the gaming I wanted, because you could always find people online willing to play in like AOL chat rooms and stuff like that. So that kind of took over my life during that period of time.
So, out of those books and out of those games, what inspired you to want to become a writer, whether it's in the RPG field or in fiction?
So, that didn't happen until much later in my life. I never even considered going into this as like a possible career. It seemed like saying you wanted to be an actor. It didn't seem like something that was realistically attainable. My big dream when I was 14 was to own a comic book store that also had RPGs added, because like a dedicated gaming store even was not something that sounded like a realistic idea. And I love comics and superheroes as well, and there was Star Wars comics too. So the comic book store seemed like a good amalgamation of all my hobbies, and I thought I could open a comic book store. So that did not work out at all. But I eventually I served in the military for 4 years, and I got out and I just bartended, and I eventually broke my leg. And breaking my leg is what led me to become a writer in a weird sort of way. Now, I had been doing a fan project since about 2005 called Fandom Comics with a good friend of mine, Ryan Brooks. And we produced Star Wars fan comic books and Star Wars fan RPG content for, at the time, the Wizards of the Coast D20 game. And, we just did that for fun. We really enjoyed it. I got to know Fantha Track's own Mark Newbold pretty well during that time. And so we did that for years and years and years. And then I broke my leg and I couldn't pay my bills because you can't bartend with a broken leg. And in America, there's no real, unemployment for bartenders not very good because it's a lot of cash money that doesn't get recorded. And it looked bleak for a minute, like I don't know what I'm going to do. But because I had served in the military, I could earn money going to school. They cut you a check as long as you're enrolled. So I was like, I'll just go back to school just to heal up and pay my bills and go back to bartending. Because I was very happy with bartending. It was paying very well, and it was good for me at the time. And my thought was like, if I'm just going to college to pay my bills, I really don't care about getting a degree that's marketable. I'm just going to do something that's fun for me. And at the time, my big hobby was writing Star Wars fan fiction and fan content for fandomcomics.com. So I was like, George Lucas hasn't showed up at my house and offered me a job yet, so maybe there's more I could learn about writing and get better at this thing that I seem to be enjoying. So that led me to going to college for creative writing at Columbia College Chicago, and I loved doing that, and it gave me a lot of confidence that it was something I could do. And I'd been going to all these conventions, the Star Wars Celebration conventions, just because I was doing the fan site, and I became friends with Sterling Hershey, who's been writing on the Star Wars RPG since its inception at West End Games, late in the West End Games run, but he was there on West End Games. He worked for all the different editions at Wizards of the Coast, and he was now with Fantasy Flight Games. And he knew me and Ryan had done this fan site and contributed to it a lot. And he let us know, he's like, hey, they're doing an open call for writers for the new Star Wars RPG. You guys should totally apply to be part of that. So the open call coincided with graduating college, oddly enough. And we got really lucky. They picked both of us to work on the line. So me and my friend that I did a fan site with got to, we have a few Star Wars books that we worked on together. Which is really special and fun, and so I sort of just fell into it kind of randomly, not expecting any of this to go the way that it has since I started writing back in, I want to say 2013, yeah. It's just been a lot of hard work and a lot of luck, mostly luck.
But it's fantastic. Again, us as fans, we get to see all that hard work put to the games that we play every weekend. I mean, I don't know how many hours we've played Edge of the Empire when it first came out, but we would start at about 2 in the afternoon after having a barbecue. which is usually around, the humid summers out here in Australia. And, we'll sit there with a little miniature Millennium Falcon, because we always have to have something there that is, the physical model. We always love having that, whether it's even used or not. It just gives us our touch.
It's ambiance, man. It's a little atmosphere. Yeah.
It certainly is. But Fantasy Flight Games comes along with this fantastic new narrative dice system, which blew us out of the water. We are telling stories faster as whether it's the game master or just the characters are getting to be involved more. And, of course, the dice app, which is just absolutely balls to the wall mad. It's awesome.
The new system is amazing. And the first book I wrote, Sons of Fortune, that I contributed to for Edge of the Empire. At the time I got that job, the game was not out yet. So I had to write like a modular encounter, which are like mini adventures, and like planet write-ups and all this stuff without really understanding what this game was or how it worked. All I knew is there were funny symbols on the dice, and I better figure it out in the next couple of weeks, or else I'm going to ruin this amazing opportunity that just fell in my lap. It's for some people who maybe haven't. I find that for people who have never played an RPG before, it's an easy sell, and they love it instantly. I teach this game to children, like aged 4 to 12, all the time, and it takes them about 3 minutes to understand how the game works. The people it's tricky with are the people who have played RPGs for years, because it's so different from all this accumulated knowledge that they have of how these games work, that I find they're actually the hard sell. I'm trying to get them to go along with the funny symbols on the dice and figure out how it works. But once you get buy-in from those people, once they're like, oh, I get what this is doing, something clicks, and then it's really, in my mind, the most fun you could have at a gaming table, period.
I can remember even saying to James, one of my mates, he was the one that bought the core book we mentioned just off air earlier, and I chucked a Yoda voice on. I said, "You must unlearn what you have learned." And
it's true.
It's true, isn't it?
So there's no D20s and there's no mathematics. It's all abstracted, and I think the strongest part about the Fantasy Flight Games system, which now works for Genesis for all sorts of settings as well, not just Star Wars, but the real strength is that it's not a binary yes or no, you did the thing. There's these multiple axes of success and failure. So yes, you might have, if you're trying to swing across the chasm, yes, you might have, but something bad might have happened as well. Maybe your grappling hook broke. Or maybe the stormtroopers on the other side got the bridge extended, so now they can chase you. Or you might fail at something, but something good also happens. Like maybe Leia gets dropped, but something good happens. She lands on a lower platform and has a good shooting position or something. So it creates these more complicated results than just like, I try to chop the orc. Yes, I hit the orc. It did this much damage. It becomes this very sort of mathematical tactics game, as opposed to a storytelling game, which is what I think RPGs are shifting toward overall, and certainly since the success of the new Star Wars game. Because we have competition with video games in a lot of ways, and at the moment, video games seem to do simulation and tactics type games better than a tabletop RPG game can, or miniatures games too do a lot of that sort of tactical simulation stuff better than RPGs can or will. But what RPGs do better than everything out there right now still is this collaborative improvisational story where you could do anything. And the more you focus on the storytelling part of things, the better a time you have, and the more unique the RPG becomes versus other types of games you could be playing on the market. Like if you do have friends that really, really love the old dungeon crawling Dungeons and Dragons or D20 Star Wars, Fantasy Flight Games does have that Imperial Assault miniatures game, which for me, I love that game, but that is like, for people who want that D20 experience, Imperial Assault like delivers that in spades. And there's a new Legion game that just came out as well that I haven't gotten a chance to play yet, but looks equally amazing. But yeah, the RPG is doing something new, different, fun, and exciting, and I can't rant and rave enough about it because I love it.
It's fantastic. I think you've nailed something there. That talking about the video games, and obviously it's it's a competitive market, no matter how you look at it. But I think one thing that misses is just the old fashioned thing of getting friends out on a weekend or out on a weeknight together around a table, and it's not just the gaming aspect; it's getting that social atmosphere, which can get lost when we're all so busy these days.
Sure. No, tabletop gaming is a social experience, right? And I know for myself, I was a really awkward kid from like junior high and high school, and not very well socially acclimated. Not the affable man you see before you today. But having these sort of social games that forced you to interact with people, and also like the game itself is a way of sort of trialing social behavior, right? Like, I'm going to go up and say this, and oh no, it didn't work. Now what would I do? So it's just like, for instance, when you're at work and it's always, for whatever reason, the sexual harassment advisor or something comes in and says, we're going to do a little role play, and you try saying this, and like, that's not okay. And like, role-playing games can teach similar lessons where they're at least forcing you to think about how you would respond in a given situation. And yes, a lot of those situations have fantasy or science fiction trappings, and they're like, action stories. Obviously, I don't think people are encouraged to punch or chop people with axes because they play these games. But I think they do get your brain sort of working in that way, and they do increase your social intelligence. There's been a lot of recent studies in this area about what sort of positive benefits this type of gaming has on especially children and adolescents. And thus far, it all seems to be positive. But yeah, I think it was critical in my early and teenage development. So
Without
if you have a kid playing these games, don't worry. Let them stay in the basement. At least they have friends. It's not bad.
So, with Edge of the Empire, you worked on, obviously, as you've mentioned, Sons of Fortune and also Far Horizons. What was the great experience working on these? Obviously, you get to build the adventures and stuff like that. What are some of the key parts that you enjoyed?
So, Edge of the Empire is sort of our scum and villainy line of the Star Wars line. It's all the, like, Han Solo sort of encapsulates what the line's about, right? So you could play a bounty hunter, a smuggler, a crime lord, like all these sort of underworldly characters that hopefully still have some like positive, character traits, but it's sort of dealing with the people on the fringes of society. Obviously, this is the first game that came out, so it has a special place in my heart. All three of the game lines, Edge of the Empire, Age of Rebellion, and Force and Destiny, are sort of intertwined. They're mix and matchable, so you don't have to feel like, well, I have this one Edge book, but then I can't buy these other books without getting everything. You could totally mix and match everything. It's just a thematic sort of separation. But Sons of Fortune is all about the Corellian system, so like Space Texas, where's Han Solo from, like what is that world like? And I got to write about Centerpoint Station, which at the time, because the EU was still active at the time, Centerpoint Station was the most powerful artifact in the Star Wars galaxy. It was like a mega Death Star, basically. It was like a huge space tractor beam that could like move stars around if it wanted to. So for my very first job ever, my very first professional writing job, let alone my very first Star Wars professional writing job, they're like, so here's the most powerful thing. Good luck with that. That was daunting to me, especially like not having a full understanding of the rules yet. Like the learning curve was so steep on that first job. Yeah, I found that I really enjoy writing about locations in Star Wars, and a lot of my work throughout all three of the lines has been working with fleshing out planets and alien species and like their planets and what that means for their culture. So that's a lot of fun for me because I get to draw on this wealth of knowledge. You can see I have all these bookshelves behind me, and they actually go on around the corner for quite a ways. But I have pretty much all the Star Wars EU stuff. I have all the new canon stuff, and I've read it all, studied it all pretty thoroughly. So one of my favorite things to do is to draw on little bits of older lore that make sense, and sort of see how things start making new connections and fitting together. So writing about planets and locations and species are just within the context of writing for these games. That's where you get to do a lot of that sort of stuff. So yeah, Edge of the Empire, I got to write some planets. I also got to do, in Far Horizons, I got to do the homestead rules, which are like your base building rules. So that was a cool sort of mechanical thing that came last minute. I pitched it to my editor, Sam Stewart, on that book, I want to say. It was like 2 days before total deadline. I was like, so I don't know if it's too late, but I just had this cool idea, and what do you think? And just let me try it and see what happens. And they ended up being pretty popular, so I was really satisfied to have gotten those in there. My only shame, unfortunately, is that Edge of the Empire is one of the lines that appeals to me the most. And because I came to the team a little bit later than some of the other more established industry people that were already on the books, I missed out on a lot of the Edge products because they just didn't hire me till later. But I wish there's some of them where it's like, oh man, I wish I could have gotten on that book. But that's how it goes, you know what I mean? I don't get to write it all. There's a team on each book of usually 4 to 6 writers. So
nice. And obviously, Age of Rebellion was the next massive RPG project that came out, which centered out soldiers, pilots, and basically the military arm of the Star Wars universe.
Right, this is the line that's sort of encapsulated by Princess Leia as a character, and I guess, you know, X-Wing pilot Luke to an extent, but Luke's more the Force and Destiny line. So Age of Rebellion is very much focused on the battle between the Empire and the Rebellion. It's a military sort of themed line, and again, it mixes and matches with the other two just fine. Age of Rebellion is special to me just because I served in the military. I was an intelligence specialist for the U.S. Navy for 4 years. And actually, in a way, I only got this job, excuse me, because of that. Funny story. So an intelligence specialist, you get like a security clearance, and you're sort of like a news anchor for the military, except you get access to a lot of classified information. But so early on in intel school, right after boot camp, you don't really have a security clearance yet because it takes time for them to do these long background checks. But you only get 4 months in intel school at the time. I think it's much shorter now. But they want to start teaching you usable skills right away. So they have to like teach us this stuff that isn't classified, but that will help us down the road. So one of the early projects is it's a public speaking thing. They want you to get up, give an oral presentation, pick something. And I'm in a class of like 30 kids, 19-year-olds like myself at the time. And they're like, we don't care, just pick a thing, get up there, give a 5-minute briefing. We call oral presentations briefings. We have to have a different word for everything in the military. But so everybody get up there, do your thing. And I'm watching other people do theirs after we prep for a day. And they're all doing like a Tom Clancy book report or a Tom Clancy, like, this is the submarine from Hunt for October, and here's its capabilities, and here's what it could do. And this is like 1998, March 1998, something like that. And I get up there, and I give in episode 1, The Phantom Menace, like rumors, casting rumors, like location shoots. Because in my mind, I was like, well, these are not proven facts, so it's intelligence, right? I'm making predictions about what's likely and what's not, and background on who these actors are, what else they've worked in, and what kind of role they might be playing. So I had like Ewan McGregor up there from Train Spotting, and Liam Neeson from Rob Roy, and all this different stuff. And this class is just laughing at me. They're laughing at me the whole presentation like it's a joke, and I'm just crushed inside because the thing about intel school is if you blow it twice, you get 2 chances where they'll let you come back. But if you drop below like an 85% grade 2 times, they ship you out, and you're tying knots and rope for the next 4 years instead of doing this job that you'd hope to do. So I'm thinking like, oh my God, it's the first week, and I've completely blown it already. And, you know, I'm a little embarrassed, but I soldier through it and get to the end. And IS-1 Knuckles, the guy who was running the class, pulls me aside after. He's like, Kappel, come here. And I'm just like, oh, standing up straight. I'm like, I'm so sorry, IS-1 Knuckles. I didn't mean to, you know, I didn't know I was wrong. And he's like, calm down, relax. You like Star Wars, huh? I'm like, yes, I'm a big fan. I'm sorry. I could redo the report on something else if that's what you want. He's like, it's fine. It's fine. And 4 months later, they're handing out duty stations, you know, telling you where you're going to be for the next couple of years. And IS-1 Knuckles hands me mine, and he's like, I think you'll enjoy this. And I got sent to Naval Space Command for the first 2 years of my time in the Navy.
Wow.
Purely because I let my nerve flag fly, you know, week 1. Otherwise, I never would have gotten that duty station. So, yeah, I got to work at Naval Space Command for a couple of years, and it's my belief that resume item certainly highlighted my application to write for FFG. It's like, here's a guy who knows a little something about this stuff. And I also served time on an aircraft carrier after that, the Theodore Roosevelt. And in my mind, the closest thing you can imagine to serving on board a Star Destroyer is serving on board an aircraft carrier. So there's a lot of like personal experience that I have that I can bring to bear on those Star Wars sort of settings, especially in the more military line, right? And just like the mindset and the lingo and some of that, I have an innate understanding because of my experiences of how some of that works. And at least I hope I'm able to bring that to the game. And also as an intelligence specialist, you spend a lot of time analyzing other nations, enemy rival nations, and just how their economy is organized and how their military is organized and their politics and all these different things. You're used to studying different versions of that and getting sort of a wide exposure to different ways of setting those things up for a country. So I have a breadth of knowledge that I can sort of insert into how these different planetary governments are set up and how their militaries are set up and how their economy works, who are their trading partners, and all this sort of stuff that other authors are getting that experience in different ways from me. But I have some legitimate training for understanding how all that stuff fits together. One of the first things I do when I'm writing a planet entry or a species entry is I get out the excellent Atlas by Dan Wallace and Jason Fry. And Jason Fry, who, oh my God, there's another guy who's doing so amazing. He just had the novelization out for The Last Jedi. That's incredible. But and he's so nice. Both of them, Dan Wallace as well. But the Atlas is like, that's probably the one thing I open up more than anything else. Because my first question is just like, okay, well, what's nearby? Who's nearby this planet, and how might that impact what's going on here? And, you know, who's on the trade routes with them? Who's influencing this planet, right? Because that's how stuff works in the real world. So it can't be that different, even though the scale is obviously different because you're talking about different planetary systems. But the hyperdrive makes it a small galaxy. So Age of Rebellion is always fun to work on, just because I know I have a wealth of knowledge and experience that I can aim right at whatever job I'm on.
Without a doubt. And obviously the third of these massive role-playing games came out was, of course, the Force and Destiny game, which me, as a lover of the Jedi, absolutely love getting into. I've even got a character that I've kept from West End Games to Wizards of the Coast, let him fall to the dark side there too, by the way, and then he come back up. His name's Jandar Wes, and just happens to have a real bogan Aussie accent, as we have out here. G'day, mate, how you going? How are you? But that character, when we went and obviously moved into Force and Destiny, I mean, again, the wealth of Force lore, the mythology, everything's there. But for you, what's so interesting about the Force and aspects of it?
So, one of my larger contributions maybe to the Force and Destiny line, I got to work on the core book for that one, which was special because that's the main selling book, and that's the one that gets reprinted a whole bunch of times. So there's a certain level of professional prestige to say you worked on any Game Line's core book. So I was real happy to work on that. I got to work on the planet section, that whole chapter 10, I think it is, where you sort of outline the geography of the entire galaxy and give a lot of details about the different regions and planets and what have you. So that was a big contribution to line, but also vergences in the Force. I got to write like a whole long section about Force vergences, how to use them in games, how to use visions in games, and how that should lead characters on their path to becoming Jedi, or rejecting that path, as it may be in some people's cases. Yeah, there's a lot of that stuff to write on. There's also more planets to talk about. I recently had Disciples of Harmony was released not too long ago, which is the Jedi Counselor career book. And Sam Stewart, the main guy who runs most of the books over there, he just said, Keith, you get 8,000 words. Talk about the role of mentors in Star Wars stories and games, and how to use them in games, and how all of that should work. So I got to write this big chunk on and just rip however I wanted to organize it about mentors. And I think that's probably some of my best writing on the line, in my opinion. And there's some interesting rules there for having mentors from other Force traditions. So if you want to play, you want to become a Jedi, but the only guy you can find that knows how to use the Force is one of the Barando sages or something like that. Like there's rules to help you sort of flavor things that way. And using like dark side mentors that are secretly evil, like Palpatine was for Anakin, and just how these things fit in. And it's always interesting to me because it connects, as we were talking about earlier, with that sort of Joseph Campbell classic myth and like the Jungian archetypes and all this classic stuff that were the same inspirations for Star Wars are things you could talk about when you're talking about classic archetypal characters like the Mentor. So that was a lot of fun to write about because it felt very full circle for me, where it's like, yeah, I'm not just talking about Star Wars now, I'm talking about things that inspired Star Wars. Yeah, I mean, the Force and Destiny line's great. I've worked on quite a bit of stuff for it at this point. And it's always fun to discuss sort of that hero's journey stuff that is included in the Edge of the Empire and the Age of Rebellion lines, but it's not as front and center as it is in Force and Destiny, where there's like that morality. In fact, there's a mechanic called morality. As you're following this sort of heroic journey as opposed to just a struggle or a fight, be it for survival in Edge of the Empire or military victory in Age of Rebellion.
Oh, without a doubt. One of the things I like about it too is that we're at a time where the Force, not just in the books and the films now, and with Star Wars Rebels as well, which we'll talk about. Obviously, you got a new product coming out very soon out here in Australia. I think it's already released in the world elsewhere, which will.
Yeah, it's out and about in the States, and I want to say many of my people in the UK that I know, some of my friends, have gotten their hands on copies already. Although I don't know if that's through standard retailers or they have other more nefarious means of obtaining copies. But it's definitely out in the world in some parts of it anyway.
Of course, we're talking about Dawn of Rebellion. So if you're a huge, let's just say Rebels, because straight away the artwork on the front, which I think is fantastic as well, is going to give you an idea of just where you're heading into. But this is a great time period for roleplay.
Yeah, it's sold as the Rebels and Rogue One sort of source book. There's a lot of Rogue One content in there as well. Unfortunately, the lead time on when you start writing one of these books and when it hits the stands is very long. So we actually started working on this book before Rogue One was out. So it was awesome in a way because I got access to like some fancy early information, which was very exciting for me. But I got to work on, in that one I worked on the 4 alien species represented in there. So there's 3 that were created brand new for Rogue One, which is Ayakaru, which is Bistan, the door gunner of the U-Wing, the little monkey guy with the big eyebrows, played by Warwick Davis, I want to say. The Tognath, which are the 2 tubes Adriel Two Tubes, which is one of Saw Gerrera's guys, and the Drabotans, which is the frog guy, Commander Pow, is the giant mouth who screams out Sakala when he's fighting on Scarif. And the Gigarans, or Gigarans, I wrote it, I'm really not sure how to pronounce it. But they're the white-colored, the albino Wookiee-looking fellas. So I got to write all sorts of lore and background and mechanics for how to incorporate those guys into your games and use them, play as one of them. And that was a lot of... It was really special because for the first time, I'm one of the first writers to get to develop stuff on one of these aliens. And that's the sort of information that, like, you never know where that might pop up elsewhere, right? Like, for instance, that battle cry of Sakala, I got to sort of develop this background story of why Drabotans might use that as a battle cry, which has sort of a Vita kind of backstory all over it with a pop singer and what have you. But, yeah, there's just a lot of fun little stuff that I got to allude to or talk about with regards to these new alien species. I also got to write up some of the planets, Chopper Base I get to write a lot about, and some of the more minor sort of locations we see throughout the Rebels show. But anytime you get to work on something that's so connected to like a movie or a TV show, it's definitely like an added thrill and just humbling to be able to have the opportunity to do it, you know. But yeah, I could ramble on forever about how exciting it was to be on Dawn of Rebellion.
Oh, without a doubt. Now, I want to draw you back to something we've been talking about earlier in the interview, which is Star Wars has obviously influenced many other franchises, and one of the ones that obviously we both agree is one of the greats out there is the anime of Robotech. Going back myself, here in Australia, you know, it was a time when, I think it was 85 when it first showed out here. We had the likes of, you know, we had Battle of the Planets on the TV at the time, Star Blazers, which was kind of this one that kind of gave me kind of a Navy feel in space with what was jet fighters, I suppose, you know, it's like a big carrier.
Sure.
And I thought, well, that's cool. And then we had, you know, the likes of Voltron come along and Ulysses 31, which had the coolest intro, by the way. But then Robotech came along, and what it learned for me from Star Wars was that if you have mortal heroes that go out, do something for the greater good, and sacrifice not physically themselves or anything like that, but their own well-being to better for others, and then it is such a good moral play.
I mean, there's a lot of parallels you can draw between Rick Hunter and Luke Skywalker. I mean, it's really easy to do. Robotech's a much more military sort of themed story than Star Wars is, but Robotech has a lot in common. It also has incredible design and some fantastic concepts. For me, it was just the Veritech fighter is perhaps the most beautiful sci-fi vehicle ever created, up there with like the Millennium Falcon or the X-Wing or any of it. So that if you could get through the intro and that stirring theme of the Robotech cartoon and not be all in, like, you might be dead inside, because it's incredible. It's everything you liked about Top Gun and everything you like about Star Wars sort of like mashed together, and as a 6-year-old for me. So that was it. I was good. I was a happy guy. The more Robotech, the better. The more shots of Veritech's transforming and launching 75 missiles and transforming again and flying away. Like, I could watch it all day. We've been lucky enough to have a few great RPG games for it, a few video games even for it, you know, which were amazing in the moment, but, you know, they weren't necessarily the greatest games of all time, but they featured the thing that I wanted to see, and they let you do the thing you'd want to do, which is be able to transform through all the different Veritech modes and blow up a bunch of scum trotty. Yeah. Actually, Jason Marker, who's a regular freelancer over at Fantasy Flight Games, he does most of the RPG books, he does the chapter 2 stuff. So he does like so many of the weapons, armor, and vehicles in all the game lines. Like the bulk of it was written by Jason Marker. So he's like the vehicles guy. He worked for Palladium for many years on the Robotech RPG line. And he, right now, as we speak, we're doing he has like his own, just for fun, Robotech Genesis sort of skin that it's like a 60-page document or something too. Like he's not playing, but just for fun, that me and my editor, who I've mentioned a few times, Sam Stewart, and a few of the other guys get together and play online every now and again as he's sort of tweaking and playing with it. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I love that setting so much. And again, it's another thing that I worked on an aircraft carrier, and what is the SDF-1 if not a giant battleship with little aircraft carriers strapped to each side of it, right? So, like, I get that world. I have like an entry into that world. Yeah, it's sort of like everything I did on the aircraft carrier combined with everything I did at Naval Space Command. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun. The character I play in that right now is a young woman who was an anthropologist that was brought in to Dr. Lang's team to help decipher the Zentradi language. So that's the character that I'm playing. And once the SDF-1 space folded away to the edge of the system, she had piloting experience because she used to have to fly these little fan jets, kind of like Rick Hunter, from location to location because she would be studying with like these tribal groups that have been isolated. And so she's like a linguist, anthropologist type of person. And so they picked her up. Now you're in this very different situation out in space. She has some piloting experience. She was working with Dr. Lang's team. So she's sort of like a Veritech pilot for our crew of heroes. But she has this sort of like linguist background as well. It's a lot of fun. We've only played one session. This is like a very new thing that we just started doing. But it's exciting. I enjoy playing.
Wow,
it's
that is
rare
awesome.
that I get to drive a character too. So
I love it. I love it when you can kind of like, again, it's taking those, story involving, whether it's a character like Dr. Lang or whether it's Roy Foco, whenever those characters that you could easily walk into, whether it's the SDF-1 or if you're,
right.
you're a rebel in the Individ invasion and you walk into finding Rand and Scott Bernard,
Sure.
I mean, whatever it is.
Sure.
But that's what
or
brings
you're
it,
at a Lancer
grounds it.
concert, you just never know.
It's so good. Like for us out here in Australia, we loved all three. I've got pals who loved the hover tanks because you could literally just put those shields up and nothing's getting
Right.
through. Byroys can hammer you all day, but you're just going to be like, yep, you ready yet, guys? But
Southern Cross is the great underrated sort of middle child of the Robotech saga, right?
yeah,
Yeah, it doesn't get enough love. I don't exactly know why, because Dana and Bowie are great characters, and the tank design is great. I think it's too separated from that core sort of cool factor of the jets, the transforming jets. That's all I could really think of.
yeah.
But because the tanks are cool, man. I dig the tanks, but I don't know. That's the one that never gets enough love.
Yes, it's funny. Out here in Australia, we loved Invid Invasion. I think it's that Mad Max in us that just love that sort of wasteland.
It definitely does have an element of like we're just in the desert, and true.
And who doesn't love cyclones?
Yeah, the cyclones are so awesome. Like next to the Veritech, that's probably the second greatest designed thing in Robotech. Although I really love the Zentradi officer pods.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like a cool look that didn't look like anything else I had seen before at that time.
And the female power armor. That was awesome.
Yeah, the female armor is more humanoid. It's Miria's my favorite character by far out of any of the Miria and Max. Those are my people. But yeah, all of it was good. All of it's great. I have so many of those books and still look through them, and I'm like, one day I'm going to get an opportunity to dust off these books and use them for a thing again.
Oh, it'd be so good.
hopefully.
You know, I think the one, obviously we got the novels from Jack McKinney, so obviously Brian Daly and James Luceno. But one thing we did in high school was we played all through what was year 8 and 9 for us, the Macross Saga, obviously Masters and New Generation. But then out comes this great book. We got it a few years after the US, the Sentinels book, and we're like, whoa, look at this, will you? The Vindicator, what is that? You know, like we're going through all these great mechas, you know, like, and we're like, well, we've got to do something. And then we found out Jonathan Wolfe was in there, and we're like, oh, Colonel Wolfe's got hover tanks? What the?
You know, I mean, it makes sense. Yeah, I wish we had access to more of that New Generation stuff, or what Sentinels 2, whatever they were calling it. Yeah, because you get so many teases and hints about it in New Generation, but with Scott and all those guys, like, we know all that stuff exists and is a thing, but we never quite got to see what came of it. At least there's some stuff that just isn't in the States yet either that I've never gotten my hands on. But yeah, I want to know what happened to that, and where's that going.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, it's just amazing that, again, Star Wars, going back to Star Wars, has, you know, given the impetus to other creators and other writers, other just creative types to look at mythology and tell their own story. And I think it's such an amazing thing. So,
I mean, one of the great themes that Robotech has in common with Star Wars is that in the end, it's not the technology that'll save you. It's the heroic internal actions, right? And in Star Wars, especially the original, we see this when Luke's on his final trench run. He turns off his targeting computer, and the droid R2 gets blasted. He's no use to Luke during the final moments of that trench run. It's Luke making the shot, and he's fighting that technological terror, right? And in Robotech, for all the Zentradi's technology and advanced knowledge of what's going on in protoculture and all this stuff, at the end of the day, it's a little girl, Lin Min-Mei, singing over the speaker that wins the day, right? Because they just don't understand what's going on. So there's definitely a lot of sort of themes in common that those things both have.
Without a doubt. Now, before we wrap, where can the readers of Fantha Tracks and listeners that will be listening to this, as this will be going up with the podcast later, once the podcast begins here at fanthatracks.com as well, where can they catch your fantastic work?
So there are a few places you could follow me. One, I have a Facebook page, an author page, which you could find at facebook.com/KRKappel, KRKappel. I'm also at KRKappel on Twitter, spelled the same way. So by all means, follow me at both of those locations. And I also run a creative writing school called the Adventure Writing Academy through Patreon. And you can find that at patreon.com/Adventure Writing Academy. Pre-registration for next year's class, we should be opening it up sometime in the next few months for August classes. We've done a year of it. It's been a great time. I don't teach the classes. I'm there for most of them. I brought in someone who actually knows how to teach creative writing, but that learned to teach through the same program I learned in, and her name's Maggie Ritchie. She's incredible. Her and I have worked together to develop a curriculum to teach creative writing online through Skype, and we have a focus on sci-fi, fantasy, and writing RPG content. And as far as I know, there is no program that offers RPG writing as a focus in the United States. So it's kind of a unique opportunity. We bring in a lot of industry guests to come act as guest students and are there sort of hang around after to answer questions. You get to meet and network with a lot of industry folks. Jay Little, who created X-Wing and the Star Wars RPG that I work on, he's our keynote speaker. For the final class, he's doing a 4-hour lecture on RPG game design, which is going to be a real unique experience as well. So if that sounds like it's for you, that's patreon.com/Adventure Writing Academy. And then I also have a personal Patreon at patreon.com/KRKappel, where I just post up sort of original content. But yeah, those are all the many places you could find me online.
Awesome. So go and check that out, Fantha Trackers. And you've also got to check out the brand new book, Dawn of Rebellion.